There's something I've never told anyone, and once you hear it, you might never set foot in a casino again. I spent years working behind the scenes of one of the biggest casinos in town. I wasn't a dealer, I wasn't a bartender. I was the guy who saw everything. The money, the winners, the losers, and the tricks we use to make sure the losers always outnumber the winners. You think gambling is about luck? That with the right strategy, the right system, you could beat the house? That's what they want you to believe. But let me tell you something. The house always wins. Always. I've seen people come in with a full paycheck and leave without a single dollar, their hands shaking, their eyes hollow. I've watched marriages fall apart right at the roulette table. I've seen grown men cry, beg, even pray, thinking that maybe, just maybe, the next spin, the next hand, the next roll of the dice would be the one. But it never is. And if you think casinos play fair, you're a fool. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why there are no clocks in a casino? No windows? Why the air always smells so fresh? It's not an accident. Everything is designed to make you lose track of time, to keep you inside just a little longer. The oxygen levels? Controlled. The lighting? Designed to keep you alert, awake, and focused on one thing, spending more money. You ever notice how the slot machines make those little celebratory sounds, even when you lose? That's not a glitch. That's psychology. A near miss tricks your brain into thinking you were so close to winning. So you play again, and before you know it, your wallet's empty. I've seen people destroy their lives right in front of me, and I've seen the casino help them do it. We had one guy. I'll never forget him. He was a regular, came in every Friday like clockwork. Had a nice job, a wife, kids. He wasn't reckless, he wasn't stupid, but he was hooked. One night, he sat at the blackjack table, sweating through his shirt, whispering under his breath. He was down bad. Every card felt like a punch to the gut. He just needed one win. Just one. Then it happened. A miracle. He won back everything he lost. He was up, but instead of cashing out, he pushed it all back in. And 20 minutes later, it was gone. Everything. I saw him that night, standing in the parking lot, staring at his car like he didn't even recognize it. I'll never forget the look in his eyes. And the worst part? He came back the next week. And the next. Because that's what we do. We don't just take your money. We take your time, your reason, your control. We make you keep playing. And you think you can beat the house? You have no idea how deep this goes. This is my confession. And by the time I'm done, you'll never look at a casino the same way again. If you had met me 10 years ago, you never would have guessed that I'd end up working in a casino. Back then, my life was normal, boring even. I had a stable job, a steady paycheck, and a routine that never really changed. I woke up, drank my coffee, drove to work, came home, and did it all over again the next day. I wasn't some high roller. I wasn't addicted to gambling. In fact, I barely knew how casinos worked beyond what I saw in movies. Blackjack, poker, slot machines, they were just games to me. A place where tourists and drunk businessmen wasted their money for fun. I had no idea what really went on behind the scenes. At the time, I was working as a security guard at a dead-end job. Night shifts, bad pay, long hours. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I had no real direction in life, just a paycheck-to-paycheck existence. Then, one night, a friend of mine, an old coworker, mentioned that the casino was hiring. Better money, he said. Way better than this place. I wasn't convinced at first. I never imagined myself working in a casino. But then I saw the numbers. The salary? Almost double what I was making. The benefits? Full coverage, bonuses, tips. The job? Easy. At least, that's what they told me. It sounded too good to pass up. So I applied. Got the job almost immediately. No long interviews, no real background checks. Just a handshake, a short training session, and a brand new uniform. It felt like I had finally gotten lucky. At first, it was just a job. Nothing more, nothing less. I worked the floor, kept an eye on the tables, made sure no one got too drunk or too rowdy. The casino was a machine, and I was just a tiny part of it. I'd watch people come in with bright eyes and fat wallets. Some of them would win, just enough to feel that rush to think they had a chance. But most of them, they lost, again and again. I didn't think much of it. People knew what they were getting into, right? Gambling was a risk. If they chose to keep playing, that was their problem, not mine. At least, that's what I told myself. But the more time I spent there, the more I started to notice things. Things that didn't sit right with me. How the dealers had subtle ways of influencing the game. How the slot machines were programmed to make losing feel like almost winning. How the casino encouraged people to stay longer, even when they were clearly losing everything. And then there were the high rollers, the ones who lost millions but kept coming back. The ones who got the special treatment. The ones who seemed trapped in a cycle they couldn't escape. I told myself I didn't care. It wasn't my money. It wasn't my problem. But deep down, I knew I was part of something much bigger. Something designed to ruin people. And the worst part? I was getting used to it. At first, working at the casino felt like stepping into another world. One where time didn't exist, money wasn't real, and everything had a purpose. A purpose I hadn't yet fully understood. The lights were always dim, but not dark. The air smelled crisp, fresher than outside. The soft hum of the slot machines never stopped, their flashing screens hypnotizing people into pressing the button just one more time. And the money, God, the money. I'd never seen so much cash in my life. Stacks of bills being passed around like they were nothing. People dropping thousands of dollars in a matter of minutes, only to pull out more and keep going. It was surreal. At first, I didn't question anything. I was just an observer, doing my job, making my paycheck. But then, I started noticing things. Small things. Things that didn't make sense. Like the regulars. There were people who showed up every single night. Same seat, same game, same desperate look in their eyes. They never seemed to win, but they kept coming back. Some of them looked exhausted, like they hadn't slept in days. Others were so deep in their own world that they barely acknowledged the people around them. And then there were the high rollers. At first glance, they looked different, more put together, wealthier, but something fell off. One guy in particular stood out. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, always dressed in a sharp suit, expensive watch, the whole package. He played baccarat, always at the VIP table, always with a glass of whiskey in his hand. But here's the thing. I never once saw him win. Not once. He would lose tens of thousands of dollars in a single night, just slide it across the table, nod, and keep playing. No reaction. No frustration. Nothing. And the next night, he was back. Same routine. Same losses. I started wondering, how much money did this guy even have? How is he still coming back? One night, after watching him lose another small fortune, I casually mentioned it to one of the pit bosses. I remember his response perfectly. He laughed, actually laughed, and then he said something that stuck with me. He's worth more to us losing than he ever would be winning. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant, but I would, because that was the night I saw something that made my stomach turn. It was late, probably around 3 a.m. The floor was quieter, the crowd thinning out. I was making my rounds when I saw the old man again, sitting at the same table, staring at his cards like they held the meaning of life itself. He had just lost another huge bet. The dealer cleared his chips, and he sat there for a moment, motionless. Then, without a word, he got up and walked toward the elevators. And I swear to God, he looked like a man walking toward his own execution. Something about it made me uneasy. Maybe it was the emptiness in his eyes. Maybe it was the way he gripped the railing like his legs barely worked. But the part that really sent a chill down my spine, he never came back. The next night, his usual seat was empty. The dealers didn't mention him. No one did. It was like he had never existed. I asked around. The other employees just shrugged. High rollers come and go, one of them said. They always come back eventually, said another. But he didn't, and no one seemed to care. That was the first time I realized. This place didn't just take people's money. It took everything. Something about that night stuck with me. The old man. The way he left. The way no one talked about him. I tried to shake it off. Tell myself it wasn't my problem. People lost money here all the time. That's just how casinos work. Some could afford it, some couldn't. Either way, the house always wins. But for the first time since I started working here, I couldn't let it go. I found myself watching more closely. Listening. noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. And the more I looked, the more unsettling it became. Like how some of the high rollers never seemed to run out of money. They would lose ridiculous amounts, hundreds of thousands in a single night, only to come back the next day like nothing happened. No frustración, no hesitación, just more bets. And when they did win, it was never enough to make a real difference. Just enough to keep them playing. It wasn't just a game for them. It was something else. And then there were the comps. The casino rewarded its biggest losers. Lavish hotel suites, expensive dinners, free drinks, personal hosts who made them feel important, special. But it wasn't kindness. It was control. The more they lost, the more we pampered them. We made sure they never felt like failures, never had time to step back and realize how much they had thrown away. They weren't gamblers anymore. They were investments. I started asking subtle questions, just casual conversation with other employees, nothing that would raise suspicion. How do these guys keep coming back? Where do they get all this money? Anyone ever just disappear? Most of the time, I got the same answers. They got plenty of money, don't worry about it. Some people just don't know when to stop. You'll get used to it. But one night, I got a different response. One of the older dealers, a guy who had been working there for over 15 years, leaned in and lowered his voice. You ever heard of markers? I shook my head. He smirked. That's how they keep coming back. Markers. Casino credit. A high roller loses big? No problem. The casino loans them money. Huge amounts, no cash required, just a signature. They don't have to leave. They don't have to stop. They just keep playing. And when they lose that money, well, the casino wants it back. I started to understand. These guys weren't just playing. They were owing. And when the debt got too big, they didn't leave on their own. That's when I really started to feel it, that gnawing, suffocating feeling in my gut. Like I was working in a place where people weren't just losing money. They were losing themselves. And then, one night, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I was finishing my shift when I saw a woman sitting alone at a blackjack table. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. She looked well-dressed, but her makeup was smudged and her hands were shaking. She had no chips left, no cash, just a casino marker slip in front of her. And she was staring at it, not in frustration, not in anger, in fear, like she had just signed her own death sentence. The dealer gave her a polite smile. Another round? She hesitated, swallowed hard, then nodded. And just like that, the house took more. I walked out of the casino that night with a sick feeling in my stomach. I didn't know exactly what was going on. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. This place was more than just a casino. And I was starting to wonder if I had gotten myself into something I couldn't escape. I don't know what exactly pushed me to dig deeper. Maybe it was the old man who disappeared. Maybe it was the woman at the blackjack table, signing away something more than just money. Or maybe it was the way the casino seemed to swallow people whole, leaving behind nothing but ghosts. But I couldn't stop myself. I started paying even closer attention, watching patterns, listening to conversations, noting which players were always there and which ones weren't. And that's when I started seeing it. Not everyone leaves. I don't mean they get kicked out. I don't mean they choose to stay. I mean, some of them just vanish. One day, they're sitting at their usual spot, pushing thousands across the table. The next? Gone. No word. No farewell. No sign they ever existed. At first, I thought maybe they just ran out of money and left. Maybe they finally realized they were in too deep. But then, I started checking the records. One of the perks of working here was that I had access to the casino's internal system. Player profiles, transaction logs, marker balances. It wasn't exactly legal for me to snoop around, but curiosity has a way of making you do things you probably shouldn't. And what I found, it didn't add up. There were names, dozens of them, with massive debts. People who had taken out markers for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some even owed millions. But here's the thing. The system had them marked as paid. Every single one, which made no sense, because I knew for a fact that some of these people had no money left. I had seen them desperate, begging for one more loan, one more chance to win it all back. So how the hell did they suddenly pay everything off? Unless they didn't. I needed to know more. So I did something stupid. I went into the surveillance room. It was risky, but I had made friends in security, and I knew that most of the time, nobody was really paying attention unless there was a fight or someone was trying to cheat the system. I found the logs for one of the high rollers who had disappeared, a guy named Richard Langston. His last night in the casino had been 5 days ago. He had lost over $500,000. And then he walked out of the VIP lounge and into an elevator. That was the last recorded footage of him. I checked the cameras at the main exit, the parking lot, the taxi stand. He never left. It was like he had walked into that elevator and simply ceased to exist. My pulse was hammering in my ears. This was real. This wasn't paranoia. Something was happening here, and I was about to find out exactly what. I scrolled through the surveillance system, looking for footage from the next few hours. The VIP lounge, the elevators, the back hallways. And that's when I saw it. 2 men in suits. Not casino staff. Not security. Something else. They escorted Langston through a side door. A door that led underground. I felt my stomach drop. Because that door? It wasn't on the blueprints. I had walked past it 100 times, never thinking twice. Just another part of the casino's infrastructure. But now I realized something terrifying. It was a door meant to be ignored. Meant to blend in. Meant to be forgotten. And the people who walked through it never came back. I closed the surveillance logs and walked out of the room, my hands clammy, my heart racing. I didn't know what was behind that door. But I knew one thing. I wasn't supposed to find out. And if I kept pushing, I might be next. I should have walked away. I should have pretended I never saw that footage, never noticed the disappearances, never questioned the way debts were mysteriously wiped clean. But I couldn't, because now I knew too much. And worse, they knew I knew. It started with small things. A shift change I hadn't been informed about. My usual access to the security room suddenly revoked. A strange silence whenever I walked into a break room, like people had been talking about me, but didn't want me to hear. Then came the more obvious warnings. One night, I left my shift to find my car's tires slashed. Another time, I went back to my locker and found it slightly open, my things neatly arranged, but my spare uniform was missing. And then there was the phone call. It was 2:37 a.m. I was home, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was imagining all of this when my phone buzzed. Unknown caller. I almost didn't pick up. I wish I hadn't. A deep voice, calm, measured. You're asking a lot of questions. Silence. That's not good for business. Click. That was it. No threats, no demands, just a simple statement. And somehow, that made it so much worse. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying the surveillance footage, the missing high rollers, the door that shouldn't exist. I had seen something I wasn't supposed to. And they knew. The next day at work, everything felt different. Colleagues avoided eye contact. The pit bosses glanced at me for just a second too long. Even the dealers, people I had known for years, seemed distant. Like they were waiting. Like they knew something was coming. And then, that night I saw them. The same 2 men from the footage. Standing by the VIP lounge. Watching me. I felt my stomach clench. I tried to act normal, to keep walking, but my instinct screamed at me, leave. I cut through the floor, heading toward the employee exit. But when I turned the corner, one of them was already there. Waiting. I froze. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me, like he was deciding something. Then, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a casino marker slip. Not mine. Someone else's. A name was written on it. Richard Langston. The man who disappeared. My mouth went dry. The man gave me a small, almost amused smile. Then, he leaned in close, lowered his voice, and said, "You really don't want to know how this works." Then he was gone. Just walked away, disappearing back into the crowd like nothing had happened. I stood there, gripping the marker slip so tightly my fingers ached. This was a warning. A final one, and I knew what it meant. If I kept digging, I wouldn't walk away either. But here's the thing. It was already too late. Because now I didn't just want answers. I needed them. And no matter what it cost me, I was going to find out the truth. I should have stopped. I should have let it go, ignored the warning signs, and kept my head down like everyone else. But I couldn't. Something about that door, about the people who disappeared, about the way the casino erased them like they had never existed. It consumed me. I had to know. That night, I made my move. I waited until my shift was almost over, keeping an eye on the security rotation. The casino ran like a machine. Every guard had their route, their blind spots, their moments of inattention. I knew them all. When the timing was right, I slipped past the VIP lounge, keeping my pace steady, my expression neutral. If you act like you belong somewhere, most people don't question you. That rule had gotten me this far, and I prayed it would get me further. I reached the hallway. The door from the surveillance footage stood at the end, unmarked, blending into the architecture like a secret meant to be ignored. My heart pounded as I reached for the handle. It turned without resistance. The second I stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. The air was colder, the walls concrete, the carpeted luxury of the casino above replaced with something sterile. There was no music here, no sounds of slot machines, no laughter from intoxicated players celebrating a win. Just silence. I moved quickly, passing closed doors, each identical, each holding secrets I wasn't ready to uncover. The hallway stretched forward, dimly lit, leading deeper underground. Then I heard voices low, steady, controlled. I pressed myself against the wall, inching closer, my breath shallow. The door ahead was slightly ajar. Inside, a man sat at a table, hands trembling, sweat beading down his forehead. Richard Langston. He was alive. Across from him, two men in dark suits, their presence suffocating. One flipped through a file, while the other leaned forward, his voice smooth, rehearsed. You knew the rules, Mr. Langston. The money doesn't just disappear. Langston swallowed hard, his fingers clenching the armrests of his chair. I just need time. One of the men chuckled, a slow, deliberate sound. We gave you time. He slid a piece of paper across the table. Now we need something else. Langston's hands shook as he looked down at the paper. I couldn't see it clearly, but then he whispered a single word. Collateral. My stomach twisted. The second man leaned in, his voice soft, almost sympathetic. You understand how this works. Either this, or we collect another way. Langston's breath hitched. No, please. The first man cut him off, tapping the paper. Your family, Mr. Langston. Langston's body locked up. His entire face drained of color. I could feel the weight of a moment, the realization sinking in. They weren't just taking his money. They were taking everything. A cold chill ran down my spine. I had assumed the worst. Blackmail, debt collection, threats, but this was something else entirely. The casino wasn't just a place where people lost their savings. It was a trap, a machine that squeezed every last drop out of the desperate. And when there was nothing left to take, it found more. I had seen enough. I needed to get out of there. But as I turned to leave, Langston looked up, and his eyes met mine. For a second, he didn't react. But then, in the smallest movement, his expression shifted. The men at the table noticed. One of them followed his gaze, and our eyes locked. My blood turned to ice. The man didn't move, didn't speak, just studied me like I was an insect under a microscope. Then, in the calmest, most casual tone I'd ever heard, he said, "Bring him in." I barely had time to react before hands grabbed me from behind. A sharp yank, and I was dragged into the room, my mind racing, my body frozen in place. I thrashed, but the grip was too strong. They forced me into a chair beside Langston, who looked just as terrified as I felt. The man who had spoken to Langston finally turned his full attention to me, and for the first time, I saw his name tag. Not security, not management, executive director. He smiled. Well, looks like we have another guest. I couldn't speak. My throat had locked up, my pulse hammering so loud I could barely think. The other man slid another folder onto the table. My name was on it. You've been quite curious lately, he mused, flipping it open, checking security footage, looking at transaction logs, asking questions. He looked up, his smile never wavering. That's a problem. I forced myself to breathe. He held up a hand. Don't lie. You wouldn't be here if you were just doing your job. Langston shifted beside me, gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. The executive director turned his attention back to him. "You see, Mr. Langston, people misunderstand how our establishment works. They think they're simply gambling, taking risks, making choices. But the truth is the house always decides the outcome." He slid the contract closer. "Sign it, and your debt disappears." Langston's lip trembled. "And if I don't?" The director's smile widened. "Then we find other ways to settle it." Langston looked at me, his eyes full of silent pleading. I wanted to help him, wanted to say something, do something, but what could I do? I was just an employee, a nobody. The moment I stepped into that hallway, I had signed my own fate. The director leaned back. "I'm a reasonable man. I don't like unnecessary complications. And right now," he gestured toward me, "are a complication." I swallowed hard. "We could resolve this easily," he continued. "You walk out of here, forget everything you saw, and we all pretend this never happened." Langston inhaled sharply, his shoulders tense. "But if you choose otherwise," the director tilted his head. "Well, I'd hate for you to find yourself in a situation like Mr. Langston here." I understood exactly what he meant. I had a choice: walk away and pretend I never saw a thing, or dig deeper and risk losing everything. I felt Langston's gaze on me, the unspoken plea in his expression. If I left now, I knew what would happen to him. And I knew, sooner or later, they would come for me too. The room felt suffocating. My hands curled into fists under the table. My mind screamed at me to take the deal. But deep down, I already knew what I was going to do. I took a slow breath, straightened my back, and made my choice. I made my choice. I wish I could say I was brave, that I stood up, flipped the table, and told them to go to hell. But the truth? I was terrified, because when you're sitting across from men who hold all the power, who can make people disappear without a trace, you realize just how small you really are. The room was silent. The executive director watched me, waiting. Langston barely breathed beside me, his body stiff, his hands curled into fists. I had two options: walk away, pretend I had seen nothing, keep my job, keep my life, or dig deeper and risk everything. I forced myself to look the director in the eye. I wasn't stupid. I couldn't take them down, not alone. But I needed time. "I just work here," I finally said. "I don't want trouble." The director smiled, as if that was exactly what he wanted to hear. He tapped the folder with my name on it, then closed it. "Smart choice." He gestured to the men behind me. They released their grip, and just like that, it was over. Or so I thought. I walked out of that room feeling like I had escaped a death sentence. My hands were shaking as I made my way back to the main floor, the sounds of the casino roaring back to life around me. Laughter, music, the clinking of chips. It was almost enough to make me believe none of it had happened. Almost. I didn't see Langston again. Not that night, not the next day. Not ever. His name disappeared from the casino system. His debts were marked paid. His VIP account? Deleted. It was as if he had never existed. I asked around carefully, subtly. Nobody knew where he had gone. Or at least, nobody was willing to say. Then the real fear set in. Because it wasn't just him. I went back through the records. Other names. Other debts. Other disappearances. People didn't just lose money here. They lost themselves. I barely slept for the next week. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Langston's face. The way he looked at me in that final moment. Like he knew. I started noticing things. Subtle things. A car parked outside my apartment late at night. A shadow near the back exit when I left my shift. A phone call I picked up. Silence on the other end. I told myself I was being paranoid. But paranoia doesn't slash your tires. Paranoia doesn't make your boss suddenly reassign you today's shifts without explanation. They were watching me. I had walked out of that room, but I hadn't escaped. I was just on borrowed time. I tried to act normal. I kept my head down, did my job, avoided any more digging. But the problem with knowing the truth is that it never leaves you. I saw things differently now. Every customer was a potential victim. Every smiling high roller was someone one bad bet away from owing the house their life. And the worst part? Nobody cared. The dealers, the pit bosses, the managers, they all knew in some way or another. but they kept their mouths shut just like I had. Because speaking up meant disappearing. I had to get out. I started making plans, looking for other jobs, saving up, cutting ties. But the casino doesn't let go that easily. The night before I was supposed to quit, I got another call. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then my voicemail pinged. I played the message. No words, just breathing. Slow, measured. Then a voice, the same calm, collected voice I had heard in that room. We take care of our own. A pause. Don't forget that. Click. I sat there, phone in my hand, a cold dread creeping up my spine. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. A reminder that I belonged to them now. That no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, they would always be watching. The next morning, I walked into the casino for the last time. I turned to my badge, my uniform, my employee card. My manager barely looked at me. "Good luck out there," was all he said. I didn't say a word. I walked past the tables, the machines, the people laughing, winning, losing. Some of them thought they were in control. Some of them thought they were lucky. None of them knew the truth. I stepped outside, took a deep breath, and walked away. For good. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because now, years later, I still get the feeling sometimes. That creeping sensation on the back of my neck. The sense that someone is just out of sight, watching. And every so often, I get a reminder. An anonymous letter. A call that disconnects when I answer. A casino chip left on my doorstep. From a place I swore I'd never return to. They don't need to say anything. Because I got the message a long time ago. You don't leave the casino. The casino leaves you. It's been years since I left the casino. Years since I walked out of those doors for the last time, telling myself I was free. But the truth? I've never really left. The memories follow me everywhere. The faces of the players, the desperate ones, the ones who thought they had it all figured out. The ones who lost more than just money. Some nights, I still see them, sitting at the tables, their eyes hollow, their hands shaking as they push another stack of chips forward, convincing themselves that this time it will be different. It never is. I wonder sometimes what happened to Richard Langston. Did he sign that contract? Did he pay his debt in some way I don't want to think about? Or did they make an example out of him? I'll never know. His name vanished from every record, and nobody I used to work with will talk about him. As far as the world is concerned, he never existed. And maybe, in a way, that's true now. I tell myself I was lucky, that I got out before it was too late, that I played it smart, that I walked away before they could pull me under. But deep down, I know the truth. They let me leave, and that terrifies me more than anything else. Because I don't know why. I wasn't anyone important. I wasn't a high roller. I wasn't a VIP. I wasn't in debt to the house. But I saw too much. I asked too many questions. And instead of making me disappear like the others, they let me walk. No threats. No ultimatums. Just a simple reminder, we take care of our own. I've spent years trying to understand what that means. Maybe they knew that no matter where I went, I'd never really be free. I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if today's the day they decide I know too much. Maybe they knew I'd never tell anyone, at least not anyone who could do something about it. Because let's be honest, who would believe me? The world loves the idea of a big win. The story of an underdog who beats the system, who walks away rich, who defies the odds. Nobody wants to hear the real truth, that the house always wins, that the system is designed to keep you chasing something you'll never catch, that the people running the show aren't just rich, they're powerful in ways most people can't even comprehend. It's funny in a way. People think they gamble because they enjoy the thrill, the excitement, the possibility of winning big. But that's not it. Not really. They gamble because of hope. Hope that they'll be the exception, that they'll be the one who walks away ahead, that they're smarter, luckier, different from the rest. But the casino doesn't sell luck. It doesn't sell excitement. It sells hope. And that's the most dangerous thing of all, because hope will make you stay when you should leave. Hope will make you believe in the impossible. Hope will make you sign a contract with shaking hands, promising something you don't even own anymore. Hope will make you keep playing, even when you know you should stop. And by the time you realize the truth, it's already too late. I've spent years trying to forget, but every now and then, something pulls me back. A sound, a smell, a flickering neon light. And suddenly, I'm there again, walking through the floor, watching the players, knowing exactly how it's going to end for them. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed, if I had dug deeper, if I tried to fight back. But that's just another kind of gamble, isn't it? The illusion that I ever had a chance, that anyone ever really does. I don't go near casinos anymore. I don't gamble. I don't even play the lottery. But sometimes I get reminders that they haven't forgotten me. A letter with no return address. A casino chip left in my mailbox. A call that disconnects the moment I pick up. They never say anything, because they don't have to. I got the message loud and clear a long time ago. You don't leave the casino. The casino leaves you. I've thought about this moment for a long time. How to tell this story. How much to share. How much to leave out. And most importantly, why I'm even telling it at all. Because the truth is, I could have taken this to my grave. I could have walked away, kept my head down, and spent the rest of my life pretending I never saw what I saw. And maybe I should have. But here's the thing. This story isn't just about me. It's about you. Because some of you have been here before. Maybe not inside a casino, maybe not at a blackjack table, but you've felt it, the pull. That whisper in the back of your mind telling you, just one more round, one more spin, one more shot. And some of you, you're still playing. I don't mean you're sitting at a poker table right now. I don't mean you're rolling dice in a smoke-filled room, chasing a jackpot that'll never come. But you're chasing something. A deal, a promotion, a dream that keeps slipping just out of reach. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's power. Maybe it's something deeper, something you don't even realize has its hooks in you yet. But I promise you, someone else does. Because that's the trick. The house doesn't need to cheat. It doesn't need to rig the game. It just needs you to believe you're in control. And as long as you believe that, you'll never walk away. That's why I'm telling this. Not for attention, not for sympathy, but because some of you still think you can win. And I need you to understand, you can't. Because I used to believe it too. I told myself I was different, that I was smart, that I could see through the tricks, that I was one step ahead. But the truth? The game had already beaten me before I even sat down to play. That's how they get you. It's the lights, the sounds, the way the casino floor is designed to never let you leave. It's the free drinks, the near misses that make you think you were so close. The high rollers who make losing look like part of the experience. It's the hope. That's what the house really sells. Hope that you'll be the exception, that you'll be the one to beat the odds, to outplay the system, to walk away a winner. But here's what nobody tells you. The moment you start hoping, you've already lost. Because the house isn't a building. It isn't a place. It's a machine, a system, a living, breathing thing that thrives on people like you. People who think they're different. People who think they can beat it. And it's always watching. You think I'm paranoid? Maybe. But let me ask you this. Why do you think I'm telling you this now? After all these years? Because I never really left. Sure, I quit my job. I walked out of that casino, turned in my badge, and told myself I was free. But freedom is an illusion. I still see them. The men in suits. The ones who never lose, because the game was never meant for them to lose. The ones who pull the strings, who decide who walks away and who doesn't. And every so often, I get a reminder. A phone call from an unknown number. A casino chip left on my doorstep. A letter with no return address. No threats. No warnings. Just a single message. We take care of our own. I used to think that meant they were protecting me. That as long as I stayed quiet, as long as I didn't cause problems, I'd be safe. But now I think it means something else. That no matter where I go, I still belong to them. And maybe, just maybe, so do you. Because this isn't just about casinos. This is about power. About the people who run the world in ways you'll never see, never understand. The ones who let you think you have a choice when the truth is the game was rigged from the start. I walked away once. I told myself I was done. But lately, I've been thinking about going back. Not to play, not to win, but to see, to find out what's behind the next door, to see how deep this really goes. And maybe if I do, I won't be the only one watching this time. So tell me, have you ever felt it? That pull? That itch? That feeling that you were so close? Have you ever stared at your own reflection, knowing you should walk away, but convincing yourself to stay just a little longer. Because if you have, then you know exactly what I mean. And if you haven't, just wait. One day you will. And when you do, you'll finally understand.